keeping up with things, they can kind of get caught up from the beginning. But maybe I'll start over here with Guadalupe, correct? Yeah. And just go around and introduce yourself, give maybe within 1 or 2 sentences a relevant affiliation if you have one, and then with that or separate from that, just kind of what you hope to bring to the committee. So.
Okay. You just call me Lupe for short. I'm been a resident of Denver for plus 20 years, of which I was able to come back and purchase a home in 2011. So was able to take advantage of the kind of shortcomings of the financial market, but realized very quickly that I can't afford the home that I would, or the neighborhood that I'd move into now. And so very much look towards affordability as an opportunity for Denver to excel in. As a profession, I'm a principal at Davis Partnership Architects, and have been involved in both affordable housing as well as cultural projects throughout the Denver market, and very much look forward to kind of seeing how this team pulls answers together.
Hi, I'm Rodney Kaczynski. I'm an architect. I've been practicing here in Denver for 30 years. I also co-chair the Sunnyside Land Use Committee. So that's how I kind of leaned into this.
Hi, I'm Joel Noble. I live in the Curtis Park neighborhood in Five Points. And I've been involved in zoning and planning topics for a long time in Denver, including co-chairing the Blueprint Denver update happened completed in 2019. 2019. Yes, 2019. My neighborhood plan was 2011. Blueprint Denver has a lot of good ideas in it, but they don't become real until we do something like this. So the good ideas that we'll be trying to see if we can make real are things that I've been tracking since we talked about them 6 years ago.
Hi, I'm Jay Homestead. I'm an instructor with the University of Colorado Denver's Preservation Program, and I also work for Historic Denver, a longtime Denver resident. And what I'm hoping to bring to this committee is just our perspective that the city's naturally occurring affordable housing stock is often in older buildings, and how we can best utilize and adaptively reuse older buildings as part of this work.
I'm Jeff Owen. I'm a resident of Denver, and I many years ago went to Colorado State University a long time ago, and I moved back to where I'm from, which is California. And then I moved back here because I loved the city. I remembered loving it, and I moved here and I started all over. And I got a job with the Department of Revenue for the state of Colorado, and they don't pay much, and so I couldn't afford a home. Except I could afford a income qualified home that I got to purchase in Central Park, and it's amazing, and I'm so grateful for it. So I want to share my experience with that, and hopefully contribute some positive feedback about my experience living there the last 5 years. Currently now I do work for a different Department of Revenue called the IRS. So I kind of moved up and got a good job there, but that's what I do career-wise, but applications for this meeting is a resident.
Hello, my name is Lucia Brown, and I have been I live in the Baker neighborhood in an old Victorian mansion, and I've been involved in housing issues for a long time, worked with Andrew on getting the group living passed, was the president of my RNO for 5 years, on Dottie Advisory Board. I dabble with the Greater Denver Transit, Denver Bicycle Lobby, all these urbanist movements, and I'm a lead with YIMBY Denver since 2021.
Hi, everyone. I'm Councilwoman Jamie Torres, represent West Denver District 3. We are 10 neighborhoods of West Denver, and honored to be here. Housing affordability and anti-displacement have been a prominent part of my time on council and a prominent part of the policies that I've been working on. So happy to be here.
I'm Gosia Kang. I'm a Deputy Chief Real Estate Investment Officer at Denver Housing Authority. Recovering architect. I spent 30 years in the profession. Just recently transitioned to a role of affordable housing developer with DHA. I have been in Denver since 2001, originally born and raised in Poland. And I recently served on the planning board, just termed out. I sit on the Habitat for Humanity policy committee. So a lot of engagement in both land use and transportation policy in Denver.
Hi, I'm Alicia Kwan Hammett. I'm an urban planner and urban designer by trade. I have a urban planning and land entitlements consultancy. I focus mostly on the permitting of affordable housing. I'm also the latest member of planning board, although that won't be true next month. And I also teach at the University of Colorado in the Master of Urban Design program. I teach urban design, economics, and equity, and I'm excited to dig into this effort and hopefully we all are able to create some solutions.
Hi, my name's Mark Moore. I'm a retired general contractor after 40 years here in Denver. And I here represent the University Hills Neighborhood Association. That's about it. I'm not as qualified as most of these people.
We're all going to bring an important perspective. My name's Mary Kate Sukowitz, and I am a board member at Harvey Park Community Organization. And that is one of the RNOs. In fact, one of the larger RNOs in Denver. And I'm currently acting as president as a board member. And during my day job, I am a public policy researcher. So I am hoping that I'm going to have an opportunity really just to kind of bring my experience and my knowledge from that work. I lead evaluations of all different types of public programs and public policies to see if they have the impact that they're supposed to have, that we hope they have. If it sounds like I'm a data nerd, I am. That is absolutely correct. So I'm really hoping that I can help this group dig in, look at data, and really kind of use that to both create new affordable housing and to preserve affordable housing as well.
Hi, Kevin Flynn. I am City Council Representative for Southwest Denver District 2, so just bordering Councilwoman Torres on the north border. I have been in Denver for about 44 years, moved here from the Philadelphia area, covered for the Rocky Mountain News. I covered City Hall, seen a lot of change, some good, some bad, some indifferent. And so I'm hoping to bring that perspective to the table.
Great. I'm Donna Garnett. I'm the CEO of Montbello Organizing Committee and the project director for the Fresh Flow Initiative, which is inclusive of 97 units of affordable housing, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units at 30, 40, 60, and 70% AMI. Happy to say we were fully leased up as of February this year. We also are working on the other components of our Fresh Flow initiative, which includes a nonprofit grocery store on the adjacent property to our housing and an arts and culture center that will be a new build built out in 26 to 27, the grocery store. Fingers crossed, any luck, we'll be able to start the reconstruction. We own the building. We have the permit. Thank you, permitting and zoning folks. We went through hell, but we have it. We have our contractors. We have everything we need. We just need to close on the new market tax credits, but hopefully that is imminent. And the grocery store will hopefully open sometime in mid to late fall. Hi, how are you?
I'm Lucas Hagen. I'm the Policy and Research Manager at the Neighborhood Development Collaborative. We're a coalition of affordable home builders. So we got Habitat, MOC, and Denver Housing Authority as our members here. My background is in public policy academically, and then also urban planning. Before going into policy, I built a fair number of middle density housing as a construction supervisor for Habitat. So I'm really excited to be a part of this project.
My name is Carson Bryant. I'm with East Colfax Community Collective. We're a nonprofit focused on fighting displacement and building collective power in the East Colfax corridor, Denver and Aurora. Specifically, what I do with East Colfax Community Collective is I run our housing trust, which is focused on the acquisition and rehab of apartment buildings in the area. So basically preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. So, I come at this work from the perspective of both a tenant power and anti-displacement advocate and as a developer, something of an interesting combination. My previous background was in housing policy and transportation policy, general land use policy. So have done work on a lot of different plans. I'm excited to cook something up here that's helpful and productive. And, on a personal level, I live in Congress Park. I rent. This is an extraordinarily expensive neighborhood, and any ways that our zoning code can permit more affordable ownership options for people in my income bracket, I think would go a long way in making neighborhoods like mine more accessible. So, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Angela Hutton Hall with City Park Realty and City Park Law Group. I am a Denver native, been here all my life, and I've been an attorney for 38 years and a real estate broker for 29 years. So I've worked on various committees, including the Strategic Housing Working Group, where I work with people at the state level. I serve on the LPC for the Colorado Association of Realtors. So we follow legislation that affects housing and anything housing and movability of properties, whatever. I'm a watchdog for those pieces of legislation that come out that affect my industry. I also serve on the Denver Metro Association of Realtors GAC committee, which is the Government Affairs Committee, and we do a lot of watching what goes on the local level. So we were instrumental in helping to revamp and help to improve the Denver affordable housing process by getting rid of the front end ratio, working with the income verification process. So basically at my law firm, we do trust and probate and that type of thing. So I leave that to the other two attorneys where I manage 6 other brokers, but I'm also involved in a lot of committees that do different things. I serve on the MLS policy committee and now on this committee. So with the number of things I've done in the city and with my work as an attorney and as a broker, I feel like my experience coming here will help with that because I've worked with zoning, I've worked with commercial properties. I've done so much in my 29 years in real estate as well as my 39 years as an attorney. So I'm glad to be a part of this group and I see all the brain power around here. So I'm a sponge. So if I start asking you questions, if I annoy you, just let me know. But I like to get as much information as possible so that we make informed decisions about our city. And my main goal in life is to get people to be homeowners so they can start building generational wealth. And that's what I've been doing. So my work is not really my work. It's my ministry. So thank you.
My name is Corey Whitaker. I'm the Vice President of Housing Programs with Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver. I've been with Habitat for about 13 years, I think, really focused on creating affordable homeownership solutions in Metro Denver, very specifically in Denver, a lot of urban infill, kind of this lower density that we're talking about with this task force. So really excited to see what kind of solutions we can come up with to incentivize more of that scale and more affordable and more homeownership.
I'm Archer Squire. I'm an architectural designer at a firm in Baker, Radix Design. We mostly do single family residential, doing historic renovation on old homes in the neighborhood, as well as like Capitol Hill and Congress Park and all throughout Denver. So I am working in the zoning code most days. We also are providing a lot of affordable units with WDRC and Habitat for Humanity with their ADU program, as well as larger multi-family affordable housing. So looking forward to influencing the zoning to help.
Hello, I'm Alejandra Castañeda. I live in the Berkeley neighborhood. I'm fortunate to own part of the home where I live in. I want to share the story of the person who was checking us in downstairs, the security guard who said that she takes the bus for an hour and a half in the morning to get here at 7 a.m. and she works until 5 and then she takes the bus back. So she gets home around 7 or so. because she cannot afford to live in this area. She lives just in the border with Aurora and Denver. So I like to talk to people. I like to hear their stories, and then I like to share their stories so that we remember other people outside of the room who sort of need our support for us to work for them. Those of us who are fortunate to already have a home, to be able to afford it. So yeah, thank you for having me.
My name is Karen Cuthbertson. I live in Athmar Park. I am a fourth generation Denver native. My family got here in the 1860s. So other than someone who's indigenous, you're not likely to find a family who's been around here longer than mine. I was deeply involved in the zoning code rewrite. As president of my neighborhood association, I've also been a past president and many other functions of inter-neighborhood cooperation. So speaking of stories, my great-grandfather was a wardsman. Didn't have council back then, they were wards. And he and Mayor Spear were buddies. Mayor Spear was often over at my great-grandfather's house, and he and my great-grandfather would drink tea in the parlor a lot. So I have some really fun stories if anyone wants to hear them later about Denver at the turn of the last century. But I'm here to try to bring a neighborhood perspective. I've been, like I said, I was deeply involved in the last zoning rewrite. So I'd like to make sure that form is not lost and infrastructure considerations are not lost going forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I think we're really excited about this group. Yes, thank you. We'll have a couple folks online have introduced themselves. Maybe we'll start with you, Brad. If you can just go ahead and do the same, give a quick introduction.
Sure, yeah. I'm Brad Yoshimitsu. I work for Corcoran Perry, which is a real estate agency company. I buy and sell real estate, residential side. But I'm representing my RNO. I am the president of Prishna, which stands for the Preservation of Residential South Hilltop Neighborhood Organization. So it's a handful, so we just go by Prishna. So my main goal is to focus on what's happening and how we're going to be developing, it sounds like from the literature that I read, the middle housing that's missing in most neighborhoods, and report back to the RNO and keep my neighborhood up to date of what's going on in Denver.
Great, thanks, Brad.
I'm just going to call on people down the list. The next that I see is Estella, and please let me know if I say your name wrong. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, my name is Estela Zuniga. I currently live in Westwood. I've lived in Westwood for the last 20 plus years. I raised my children there. I'm currently the vice president of Westwood Community Action Team. I was part of the foreclosure hotline from 2009 to 2018, the Colorado Foreclosure Hotline and Colorado Connects, Housing Connects from 2009 to 2018. And now I'm actively working in the community and just trying to find that middle point for people to have affordable housing. Obviously, in our community, there's a lot of gentrification, and just I'm also part of the Southwest Area Plan, Neighborhood Initiative Plan, and so we had a lot of we were able to increase our participation in people having their voice there, which I'm very proud of. It was a lot of hard work, but we did it, and just trying to make sure that our voice in our community is heard. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Next up, I have Heather.
Hi, this is Heather Lafferty. I am I've been in Denver for more than 25 years, and I've lived in Northwest Denver. as a homeowner for the last 25 years. I professionally have worked in affordable housing for most of my career, both affordable homeownership as well as affordable multifamily rental. Excited to be a part of this committee. I believe our zoning in lack of density is one of the chief challenges that we have in ensuring that people can afford to live in our city. So I'm looking forward to unlocking, love the title, unlocking those opportunities. Thanks.
Great. Next is John.
Yes, hi. Excuse me. My name is John Hindelman. I've lived in Denver since 1953. So I've seen a fair amount of change over the years. I began practicing architecture in the early 1980s and was primarily involved with production home builders up until the S&L meltdown in the late 80s, at which time I started doing more single private residences, additions, preservation work, interior and exterior alterations. In the late 90s, I spent about 9 years on Denver's Zoning Appeals Board, the Board of Adjustment, and that subsequently led me in 2005 to becoming a committee member on the zoning task force on the rewrite between 2005 and 2010. I recently joined with Congress Park Neighbors. I'm on the board there, and I've been working with the board and the neighbors on a conceptual design overlay, which led me to meet both Josh and subsequently Rob, who said, hey, you guys need to get involved in where we're going with the UHC and see how things could overlap. So I'm ecstatic to be involved in this, and I'm looking forward to the coming months.
Thank you. Next I have Nick.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Nick Pekovich. I apologize with work today. My wife is also incredibly pregnant. She's doing 2 days with our third kid, so I wasn't able to make it in person. But we moved here in 2019 from Washington, D.C. and bought our first house just before COVID shut everything down. We're in South Denver, a few blocks west of Denver University. I'm a local realtor and builder, very involved with our RNO, the University Neighbors Neighborhood Association. It's District 6, very active in our community. I'm familiar with the city comprehensive plans and building homes that really fit the needs of the surrounding community. I do see issues with a lack of middle housing and a lack of density, especially in our neighborhood, which I expressed to our councilman, Paul Cashman. He's actually the one that brought this advisory committee up to me and recommended that I try and join due to my interest in sustainable growth within the city to meet current and future needs. And I'm excited to be here, learn more, and provide the best input possible based on my career and life experiences.
Great. And then the last person we have online is Nola.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nola Miguel. Nice to hear all your voices. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm trying to go on vacation starting tomorrow and traveling right now. So I'll be brief. I'm the executive director of the GES Coalition and Tierra Colectiva Community Land Trust. GES is Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhoods in North Denver. And Tierra Colectiva means collective land in Spanish. And we are a community-led community land trust that came out of organizing around anti-displacement work in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. And I'm excited to both participate as a that is doing missing middle housing in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. We have scattered site homeownership sites that we work with different developers on, including Habitat for Humanity and Corey. And we are also working on several multifamily projects in the neighborhood, 2 commercial spaces and an open space that are all preserved as and permanent community assets for our neighbors. So also have a policy perspective around, maybe unintended consequences potentially for neighborhoods like Lavalier, Swansea when we do different changes in zoning. So I'm excited to participate, and I'll be there in person next time. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it now. So we had 100% attendance today. Thank you all again for making the effort to get out here. It's awesome. I know it's a pain to get downtown and park and be here. And again, we just really appreciate it. So we are really excited to get started, and we know we're excited to hear what you have to say about the project. As these meetings move forward, they'll kind of start like a little bit more content heavy and kind of shift to the other end of the spectrum. We'll be giving more and more time for speaking. That said, I think would like to set apart a fair amount of time today for discussion. So I'm going to move through some slides that give some background information and some introduction to why we're doing this project and generally what we are looking to achieve. There'll be points throughout the presentation where I'll break for questions. We really like to keep that to like questions and clarification about the material that we just went over. And if you can hold like kind of more general comments or kind of discussion type input until kind of the larger point at the end of the meeting when we're going to have, or at the end of the presentation when we have that time set aside, we can really get deeper into things. So that said, I will go ahead and start presentation here. So we would like to get into what this project is about and why, what we're really trying to solve for. So the first thing is, as we know, housing is really expensive, and it's gotten more expensive in Denver. Over the past 10 years, we've seen housing prices increase at more than double the rate that incomes have increased across the city. There are many factors that have contributed to this rise in housing costs. Some of these we have control over or can affect, and some of these we really can't through a change in the zoning code. So these include the limited housing supply, restrictive zoning, construction costs are increasing, interest rates are higher now than they were previously, that slower rising of wages compared to the price of housing, and many more factors. And again, some of these factors are larger regional concerns and issues. Some of them are national or even global issues. Because this project is primarily affects the zoning code and zoning regulations, we can't hope to have an effect on the cost of construction, right? Depending on what tariffs might do or any number of things, we just can't control some of these costs. However, there are some things that we can do and have a strong impact on updating the city's zoning rules and regulations, along with other tools the city has through CPD's partner agencies that can help provide some of that relief and address housing supply issues, and also provide more options for Denverites who are looking to buy houses in so many of the neighborhoods across the city.
Can I interrupt you quickly? The first slide, was that Denver or is that Colorado?
Oh, this slide, I believe this is in Denver.
Denver, okay.
This slide here on the left shows a map of Denver's zoning. And highlighted in yellow is the single family or single unit zoned areas. These areas cover about a little bit more than 35% of the city. So 35% of the city is sequestered and only can provide housing in the most expensive form that we have, which is a single unit residence. There are many missing middle housing options within these neighborhoods that were built prior to the zoning in place. So sometimes in these cases, you could point to a neighborhood and say, well, I know there's a duplex in there. And that's because those were built prior to the zoning that we currently have being established. Because these areas are mostly built out, they really can't absorb any of the incoming housing that Denver needs to provide. So what that has done is it has placed and narrowed the pressure on providing that needed housing to the remaining 65% of the city, which includes the airport and other things like that. So, the areas that can provide housing that residential uses are allowed, these single unit zoned areas take up about 67% of that land. So 33% of the area that you can build a house is the only place that we can, or one of the only places we could really significantly increase the supply of housing. Additionally, these are the areas that are really desirable, and a key part of the project and what we would like to provide is more options for people to live in these neighborhoods. So what this results in is kind of demonstrated by this graph on the right, where a Denverite looking for a house is often stuck between either deciding to live in a larger apartment with 10 units or more. A lot of times these are along corridors and they're not in kind of the quiet, more residential areas. And then between that, or struggling to afford a single unit residence. And there's really not much of that selection for this 2 to 9 unit category, which is often described as the missing middle. So Denver's growth has slowed in the last couple of years, but it is still growing. And projections show that we need to provide housing for an additional approximately 143,000 people projected by 2050. This is in addition to the housing shortage that we still have today, because up until this point, Denver has not produced housing, and the housing production has ebbed and flowed. There are years where we've produced a lot of housing and years that we've produced less. But over the longer term, we're still working on a deficit. We need to provide housing for those individuals and families, as well as people who are either coming of age and moving into the world or moving into Denver. So because a large portion of Denver's housing is this single unit zoning, the market is able to provide housing for these highest income earners. On the other end of the spectrum, all federal, state, and local housing programs, like the recently passed mandatory affordable housing ordinance in Denver through the EHA project. These are things that help support income earners on the lower end of the spectrum afford housing in Denver. However, there's this gap in the middle where there are not as strong tools to help provide assistance and really housing options for these individuals. So that's exactly where this term missing middle housing fits in. And we will, in a couple slides, take a look closer at missing middle housing and what we mean when we talk about that, because this is a term that's used in a couple different ways. So in addition to that demonstrated need and kind of what we see based on the data and the information available to us and showing that we need more housing and we need housing options, we also have our adopted plans. So through the planning process, which is a robust engagement with different communities across the city, we have heard that people want more options to live in their neighborhoods, whether it's the same neighborhood that they live in to age in place, or a city or a neighborhood that maybe their friends or family live in and maybe they can't afford it. But we've heard this desire for more diverse housing options within more of Denver's neighborhoods that are more providing just a single type of housing. So Denver's citywide guidance reflects this, what we've heard from constituents in the city and from Denver's residents to provide these additional housing options. This is just a quote from Blueprint Denver, which is our primary land use and transportation plan at the citywide scale. And there is additional guidance and additional nuance in a lot of the city's neighborhood plans that are more specific towards certain parts of the city. We'll be taking a lot more time in next month's meeting to kind of dive in and take a closer look at the guidance in our adopted plans. However, this guidance that's quoted here is kind of the big basis for what we are, why we're kind of undertaking this action and undertaking this project. So that leads us to our project goal. So kind of in one sentence, this could be understood to be what this project really hopes to achieve, and that we would like to allow more missing middle housing options in Denver. The key parts of this are emboldened here. And the first one being we're going to examine and update our building forms and design requirements to promote better compatibility with what's being built within the neighborhoods that currently exist. We are also going to explore possibilities for incentivizing preservation of existing houses so that we don't have widespread placing of houses of all sizes, really. Additionally, we are looking to incentivize or potentially require on-site affordability in any new added housing. So with that, I'd like to break here first for questions. So again, questions, clarifications. Sure, it wasn't that clear. Maybe raise hands and I'll kind of go around this way. So, Council President.
Just Councilwoman.
Oh,
Appreciate that. The first map that you showed of the single unit zone district didn't include chapter 59. What's happening with that?
Yes, we are absolutely going to consider former chapter 59.
Okay.
So what we've already started to do is compare the zoning districts in the Denver zoning code to those like analogous R2 and R1 districts in former chapter 59, and we will apply the same standards or similar standards across both of those districts.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question is two parts.
Okay.
One is we've seen lots of for rent properties going up and don't know about the incentivizing of preservation of those types of properties for conversion. So is that something we are looking at so that down the road we have an inventory of properties that can be for sale units, even if they're built right now for rent units? It used to happen years ago where they had converted properties from apartments to for sale units. Is that something we're going to look at as a project or no?
Yes, I think so, to a degree. You know, it's not going to be something that we focus on or maybe require. We just don't have the ability to kind of administrate a requirement to build houses for sale. However, it might be something, and this might be a recurring theme through this project, that there might be kind of a movement that's kind of going along tangentially. There's also the advantage in a lot of these middle housing types that just kind of are more conducive to being for sale as opposed to a condo. So, you know, if we look at like a side-by-side duplex, those can, or row home, or even like a garden court where the multiple units on the ground level have their own private entrance. Those are a lot more conducive to a fee simple sale, which makes that easier. So to that effect, there also might be some increase in the amount of for sale, but.
Yeah, so I was just curious because all the building that you see is mostly apartments and they're all for rent. So at some point, we're going to be out rented, so to speak. And then my other question is, second part. I've worked on Blueprint Denver and the IHO as well, the inclusionary housing ordinance. Is any of this going to affect how we work within those parameters on both of those policies or no?
That's a good question. So maybe to clarify, like, will this project affect how you said Blueprint Denver and
the inclusionary housing ordinance where they're talking about that affordable housing belongs under that umbrella?
Right. Yes, I think it could potentially, and ideally, what this project will do would be implement policy guidance from both.
That's
of
what
those
I'm asking.
documents.
Yes. Okay. Very
we will
good.
absolutely do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Are we going to explore as an option of just sort of getting out of the way? I mean, a lot of this sounds like more micromanaging and more bureaucracy for building homes. Let's make sure it looks like this and the form is that and this and that. Really just want to get people in houses and, just get out of the way. That is an option of just loosening things up, getting rid of some of the things that we've got going on, and just allowing building to more organically happen instead of having to provide incentives. The incentive is you're not getting in the way. Is that an option?
Absolutely, yes. The balance we have is getting out of the way while not fostering really excessive change that has an outsized impact on one neighborhood versus the other. So
yeah, if we do it citywide, of course.
Yes, yeah, getting out of the way is we're gonna try to simplify things as much as we can. And to that respect, yes, we're trying to get out of the way. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on your question about a lot of even small multifamily that's being built as for rent rather than for sale. Has staff done an analysis, and if you've not, could you, for us, analyze what impact, if any, construction defects litigation has had as an obstacle to ownership product rather than for rent. You all are probably aware in development services right now, there's a 98 townhome development in my district in Brentwood that is all going to be for rent. And I applaud that because there's a need to provide rental housing. But I don't know if the developer in that case wanted to do ownership, but opted out. So I think the group would benefit from analysis.
Absolutely. Sure. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, it's something that we are definitely looking into. All right, any other questions, like clarifications about things? We're getting closer to like discussion topics. So if you do have questions and clarifications about the material we just provided, maybe keep your hand up. Okay, I'll start on the right. Joel, you had your hand up first, I think.
Yes, the first line of the goal sentence said we're focused on form standards, the zoning form standards, and design requirements. And so my question is, are we limited to just that regulatory tool? Or when we dig into this, especially with the testing that you said, root policy, Mary Kay, what we do here has to translate into actually housing being built rather than, oops, we made the zoning do it, but the building code won't let you do it. Or oops, some other thing won't let you do it. And we had blinders on because we decided the only changes we're going to make are to building form standards.
Right. Yes, you're exactly right. So we really hope to work with the other parts of community planning development as well as other agencies to coordinate those efforts. However, that we can really have direct control over the zoning code and what's in that. So we're gonna start there. If we can work with those departments and kind of figure out potential changes to the building code, absolutely, we're gonna do that and propose those changes. But if there's a possibility where we get the zoning code out of the way, and then in future efforts, it will be kind of working on finishing those pieces that might end up just being a recommendation if we're not able to make those changes to the building codes or parts of the regulation that our department doesn't have specific exact control over. But ideally, yes, we would address those.
And the testing that you talked about doing is not just financial modeling, it'll also hope to reveal those other barriers, right?
That's correct. This way. Gosha and then Alejandra.
Thank you. So about clarification regarding the inclusionary zoning, because the expanding housing affordability really addresses that missing middle. We're expecting market rate developers to set aside certain number of units within about 80% AMI, or if it's rental, higher if it's for sale. But it is kind of a missing middle, market delivered missing middle housing when we talk about incomes on these kind of higher densities. So are we applying the same thought process here to where we would incentivize developers to provide a certain number of this kind of missing middle income units within those building forms? Are we also talking about deeper affordability that's really going to require some form of subsidy?
I can't say for certain yet. So that's part of what our financial feasibility study is going to tell us, whether or not it's even feasible to have a requirement for affordable units between the 2 and 9 unit range. And what that level of affordability is that would need to, we would need to ask for in order for developers to, make it pencil for them. And then if there's even a need for that. So, I can't say yet whether or not we will have a requirement similar to the current mandatory affordable housing, which, like you mentioned, is 10 units or more. We might have a different strategy for this area. There might not be a requirement for this area depending on the outcome of those, that financial feasibility and kind of what we are able to deliver. Yes, on Corey's hand, or sorry, Alejandra and then Corey.
That's okay. Can you go back to the map with the percentages of single unit and tell me again the 35% versus the 65%? So like communicating this data and these percentages to people who are outside the room again. Can you explain that again? Please?
Yes, I can. So if you look at the area of Denver as a whole, about 35% of the land area is zoned for single unit, is zoned SU, right? So USU or one of the analogous former Chapter 59 zone districts. That similarly, as a primary use, allows for single family homes or some civic, other institutional type uses, things like churches and things like that can still be built in single unit zone districts. But as far as residences go, within that 35% area, only build a single unit house and an accessory dwelling unit now. If you look more narrowly at the area where you can build residential uses, so this includes mixed use areas along corridors, it includes multi-unit areas and more dense areas of the city. If you kind of isolate those areas anywhere else where residential uses are allowed, 67% of those areas, you can only build a single unit primary use.
Because I had seen a stat from a few years ago that it was about 74%. So I'm wondering if it relates to that last that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because we have increased some density in some areas. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Corey?
I was just curious if or how Host will be involved in this process.
We are working super closely with Host and meet with them regularly. They'll come and be at a handful of these meetings with you all, but especially once we kind of get more of the data that we're working with our consultants now and can start figuring things out, that's kind of when their impact or their involvement will be heavier. But we already work with them very closely. So
Host equals what?
the housing office.
Facility.
Office of Housing Stability, yeah.
Yeah, okay, stability.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. There will be plenty more time for questions and comments. And yeah, thank you all for those comments. That's really helpful to know where we have questions. I think you already have some things we can look into. But now we're gonna take a look at some of the defined terms that will help us as we move through this discussion so that we're all speaking the same language. Some of these terms, particularly this one, missing middle housing, is used in different ways depending on who you're having a conversation with. For the purpose of this project, when we talk about missing middle housing, we're going to talk about the form, right? So we're talking about the type of building and the number of units within it. So we define missing middle housing as house-scaled multi-unit housing falls between single-unit houses and large apartment buildings. So this includes duplexes, fourplexes, row homes, townhomes, and some other products that are closer to apartment buildings. Missing middle housing kind of intrinsically also can tend to serve more middle income individuals, and that's kind of the other most commonly used form of this term. But when we talk about it, we're going to talk about the building and number of dwellings within that building and that sort of thing. The next term that we would like to define is affordable housing. So this definition comes from Blueprint Denver, and it's how our plans generally define affordable housing. So this is a kind of our blanket term for housing where the occupant pays no more than about, depends on exactly what you're looking at, but about 30% of their gross income on their housing costs. When we use the term affordable housing, we will be talking about subsidized housing or income restricted housing, as well as naturally occurring housing that might exist and be affordable to somebody because of its smaller size or division of land or that. So it's kind of inclusive of both things.
Do you, by naturally occurring, do you mean market rate?
Correct, yes. So it would be, there's no protection or requirement that it stay under a certain cost. If we are going to talk about something that has a requirement for that where that affordability is based on a certain AMI level or area median income, and that's secured using some type of formal mechanism or program that is administered either by the city, like departments like Host, or by the state or other nonprofit organizations. That is what we'll call income restricted housing. And again, it's kind of within that affordable housing. The other type of affordable housing that fits within that definition is what we'll call attainable housing. So these are housing units that are naturally lower than the cost or the naturally lower cost of the dwelling unit is affordable to applicants, and again, at about 30% of their income. And again, this is often provided by missing middle housing, since land costs are divided between dwellings on the same lot. They're typically smaller than single unit homes as well. So again, last definition here for the purpose of this project, when we talk about multi-unit housing, we are talking about everything from 2 units and up. So a duplex multi-unit house, 2 single unit structures on 1 lot, we'll call multi-unit. So whether it's 1 building that contains multiple units or multiple buildings that contain those units, if they're on the same lot for the purposes of this discussion, we'll call that multi-unit. We have a couple different ways that happens in Denver now with tandem houses. So you just want to be inclusive there. Another reason is that in our zoning code, there's a different use category for 2-unit use and multi-unit use. But for the purpose of this project, again, we're going to call them all multi-unit housing. So once we get into this project, these next couple slides talk about things that this project will do. So at its base level, the project will amend the Denver zoning code and former chapter 59 to allow more house scale multi-unit housing options in Denver's residential neighborhoods. This is what also we call a text amendment. We're amending the zoning code and zoning regulations to change what's allowed within the existing zoning. So there likely will not be a rezoning or will not be rezonings required in order to build the houses that we might be enabling through this project. We are going to change the rules so that can be done without any rezoning. We are also going to explore incentives or requirements for providing affordable housing through income restriction provisions or restrictions that might provide attainable housing. We're going to update the design standards within our Denver zoning code and former chapter 59 to ensure new development is compatible with our existing house scale neighborhoods. And we are going to explore establishing incentives for preserving existing structures. So with that, again, I'll wait for questions and let's try to keep it to clarification. We have like one more quick section and then we'll really be able to be wide open in discussion and really get into things. Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, just a pretty important scope question for me. The range that you talked about were all structures built to have multiple units in them, like duplex and quadplex and whatever. And you talked about house scale, so these kind of small things, but it didn't sound like, at least explicitly, we were going to cover, what if somebody wants to subdivide an existing house? I think that's so important that we include in our scope here. Traditional neighborhoods like mine, and I'm sure many others, there's some number of houses that at some point in time people subdivided and you can see multiple mailboxes. And it fits all the things we're talking about. It's house scaled, it fits in. It's naturally occurring affordable housing. Can we have that discussion in our scope?
Yes, absolutely. And it is part of the scope, and I apologize for the inclarity there, but yes, it is definitely part of the scope, whether that's, dividing a house into, smaller units, adding a basement apartment, or any number of different ways you could subdivide a house. That is absolutely part of the project. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Okay. Oh, yes, I did see the question pop up online, and then I'll get to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Heather.
Hi, I apologize if this question was asked and answered. I don't have the best connectivity right now. Will we be looking at other cities that have, gone through either a similar process, just have enough differences in their zoning code to give us some clues as to what might help?
Yes, we absolutely will. We will be taking a deeper dive into that next week, where we'll look at a bunch of the case studies in similar cities who have done undertaken similar projects. Additionally, on our webpage, there are versions of our our current Peer City review that you can read in depth too. So if you go to our webpage, you can find that. Great, thank you, Heather. So Angela.
Yes, I just have a really quick comment. In procedurally, when we're amending the zoning code, does it require a public hearing before it's adopted and implemented?
Yeah, great question.
Okay.
And I apologize for, I don't even think I have a section of slides that describes that. So, so through this process, we will be working on preparing the strategy that we will move for ultimately that will result in the kind of redlined changes to the Denver zoning code. Through that, we will take that proposal to City Council through the whole adoption process. So first it will go to Planning Board, and there will be a public hearing at Planning Board, and then there'll be a public hearing at City Council as well.
I was just wondering, I was like, we have carte blanche in this committee? We can just do this?
Great question. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I have several. Okay. First of all, but I think you just answered it. Our audience is who? Who are we doing this for in the long run?
So our audience will, I guess, be the city of Denver. This is a citywide project, so this will impact or affect the whole city. More specifically, we are focusing on areas of the city that have single unit, 2-unit, or row house zone districts.
Okay, let me back up and add to that question. So did city council members authorize and ask for this study and this work to be done? Did the mayor's office ask for it? Did you all in planning just make up this idea and decide to do it? Who are we really answering to is what I'm trying to understand.
Great. So my first question, and then maybe I'll pass it off to Andrew if
okay. I see Andrew shaking.
I will say, I will say that the reason that we are undertaking this project is because it is there's strong guidance in our adopted plans, Blueprint Denver and the comprehensive plan, as well as recently adopted neighborhood plans that says we should implement a project that encourages allows more housing options in Denver's residential neighborhoods. So because of that plan guidance, that is why we're undertaking this process. So as I explained at the beginning, we are, the planning process has a lot of the really robust engagement and outreach process. And through that, we kind of take all of that input and articulate it into the policy guidance that makes its way into the plans. And so in this project, we are taking that policy guidance from the plans that comes from that robust engagement, and we are actually making the changes to the code that will implement that vision of the city and the plan guidance. So I'll pass it to Andrew if there's anything that I've missed maybe about.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Rob. I would say in a typical year, CPD will take on 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 text amendments to the zoning code, and almost all of those are come from guidance in our adopted plans. So it's kind of the next step after that community process that Rob talked about. The plan is adopted by city council, sets forth the land use and other policies for the city, and then it's our job to implement that with regulatory changes.
So my last 2 questions I'll time together. One is, the first part of that is, I served under Mayor Hancock. We were the first in the new round of small area plans. We have a whole bunch of stuff in there that's never been addressed. It went through the process, planning board, city council years ago. And some of those things aren't being addressed still. And so I guess I'm hopeful hearing you say that this is an opportunity to come back around and revisit those. I know some of my colleagues around the city have completed their small area plans. Some are still engaged in their small area plans, but I hope we're going to look at that because it has a lot, at least ours has a lot of questions related to developers and developers having rights that don't necessarily fit with the needs of communities. And I really want to see those addressed. The second part of that double question is, how does this relate to the planning board? So two things, small area plans, planning board, then I'll be quiet.
Sure. So through this project, we will be looking at the different area plans, pulling all of the relevant plan guidance from them, and that will be kind of fed to this group and city staff as we develop the strategies that will implement the citywide guidance and those adopted plans at the area level. And as far as planning board goes, once we have our proposal, we'll kind of work through this group, and then by the middle of next year, at middle of 2026 or so, we'll begin that adoption process. And this will go and have a public hearing in front of planning board, where planning board will evaluate and make any comments or and then vote to make a recommendation to city council. That said, also we are already having joint meetings with city council and the planning board. We have the next one in August, and we are just kind of working with them and getting their input already throughout, kind of at points through the project.
Thank you.
Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question about if there's overlap between this study and the state requirement for the housing needs assessment requirement. So will this be dovetailing with state policy requirements?
We're a little bit ahead of the housing needs requirement or housing needs assessment that HOST is doing. We actually met with them today and we talked about that. They're kind of within the kind of scoping project portion of that project still, so we'll be ahead of it probably. I think we have some folks online, and then I'll get right to you.
I think Heather had her hand up first, if you have an additional question.
Go ahead, Heather.
No, I apologize. I just put it down.
Okay. I guess next then. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, so this is looking a little bit forwards, but let's say we approve all these rezoning of different neighborhoods to middle housing. Are there any protections in place that we're going to have to keep private equity out? So let's say BlackRock or some big private equity money gets wind that we're doing all this, and they try to buy up properties that they could make a lot of money on by creating middle housing. Are we gonna put any protections in place to ensure that doesn't happen?
That will definitely be part of the discussion.
Okay.
And again, I want to clarify that we probably will not be rezoning neighborhoods. It'll be changing the regulations within the zone districts that exist currently.
Okay.
But yeah, just to kind of make that distinction between a rezoning and a change to the Denver zoning code. So
Rob, just to clarify on that explanation, so SU will still say SU, it just will mean something different.
SU will most likely still say SU.
Yes, okay.
But then SU means then what? It'll just mean there's more flexibility if you go in front of a public hearing?
No, so there might not be a public hearing for the types of housing that we're enabling. SU still might be SU because those SU areas, even if we were to allow more housing types, would still remain predominantly single unit. And there might be a type of housing that's allowed as infill development. In the same way that a single unit zone district isn't single unit and churches and utility stations and things like that. There are other things that are generally allowed in those areas that still kind of predominantly have a single unit character.
Expanding allowable.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
I didn't hear what Luca said.
Expanding allowable uses.
Thank you.
All right, Councilman Flynn.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification, because there's going to be a conflict with adopted plans. What Donna brought up with the Far Northeast NPI specifically says that their low residential single unit means single unit and duplex is not appropriate. So if we pass a text amendment that says one unit means four, that's going to be in conflict with many of our adopted plans. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great comment and something I think we're definitely still exploring. I might have spoken a little bit quickly to say we're not going to rezone anything. There might be certain areas that have rezonings, but primarily this is an amendment to the code itself. But yes, I appreciate the clarification. You're right. It's in it and that is a great question, and it's something that we really look forward to examining more closely with this group when we have kind of all of that plan guidance in front of us and can do that further, that deeper dive. Yes, go ahead.
To follow up on the, so what does SU mean now?
Oh, sorry.
No, no, but the question was, so SU means what now? In my view, if SU area allows ADUs, it is no longer SU, or it is no longer SU as it was defined. So I'm wondering if you could overlay that map that you showed earlier, that showed the single unit, overlay the areas that's currently allow ADUs so that we can get an idea of single unit doesn't really mean one unit now, so that we can understand what it is we're trying to talk about in terms of what areas we're trying to actually infill.
So that's a fairly easy thing to do. I can actually just say that this area shown on this map that shows single unit zoning is also the area where ADUs are allowed.
So all of it is?
All of it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there row house also? 2-unit row house that we allow ADUs?
Well, this map shows, I might have misunderstood the question, but yes, in those districts, ADUs are allowed. So, yes, go ahead, Ella.
Just a quick question about communicating this to people outside of this room that don't have all of the experience and lingo that everybody has. Is someone from the communications department at CPD gonna be present in these meetings and sort of following along and like sort of kind of keeping track, and how do we translate?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. We've been working closely with our communications team, and I think something that's been highlighted to this, at this point in the meeting is that, we need to continue to work and do a better job of kind of speaking in more common. I'm very guilty of kind of defaulting to our planerese, so never hesitate to reach out or to ask. Raise your hand if you need any clarification, or if you want me to explain something in a different way too. It might be
Well,
easier
more
for you
just
to
like as
explain.
messengers, right? Like I
Right,
feel
right.
like I'm here not just for myself, but as a representative of other people who don't understand things, yeah.
And sometimes it helps to think of it as like ownership, so like in single unit, you can own a single unit home with an ADU, but you can't own an ADU separately, right? So no one can like live in the ADU and own that property. Single unit is the primary use within those districts. And so a single unit structure is, as defined through the zoning, the primary use on the property. Does that make sense? And so if we're thinking of these options of like, we want more home ownership, we want more entry-level housing, we want people to afford houses, we need to kind of think beyond ADUs as the solution.
Yes.
I love that question because I think it speaks to a larger issue around community engagement. And I heard kind of generally what the thinking, it sounds like the thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we had a community engagement processes around these NPIs. And we have conclusions from the NPIs, and therefore, if we're working within the boundaries of the guidelines that are in these NPIs, then we have engaged the community. I'm wondering if beyond the city council hearing, are there going to be other opportunities for like a broader, deeper community engagement beyond plans that maybe are still in development or were developed 10 years ago? Just, I'm kind of curious about that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so we have, this is only one part of our engagement strategy. I'll have a schedule that we'll look at kind of at the end of the presentation, maybe after we go through our other discussion, but I can pull it up in a moment, but that shows kind of a broader view of our engagement. So we're going to have community meetings, 2 rounds of community meetings held at locations throughout the city. And we're also going to have focus groups and we have a newsletter. We're always accepting public comment from anyone who takes the time to send us a message. And we'll probably do some type of polling and survey too as well. So there will be an engagement process, but you are also correct in that we are kind of working from a lot of engagement that we've already heard from the community. Yes, go ahead.
Just to make a comment, I think when we talk about like low residential areas, people think that's no growth, but Blueprint Denver doesn't have any no growth areas. It's actually like a 10% or lower. And I don't think that gets communicated when the NPIs are being done. And so people think that, you know, if you're in a kind of a more suburban-esque single family neighborhood, that growth is not going to happen, but there's no adopted plan that prevents growth. It's very minimal, modest growth, but it's still 10% is still significant when you look at a geographic area. And I think a lot of these things kind of to the conversation is we need that communicated from CPD to the public. And so I don't think that that necessarily gets communicated when we have these kind of neighborhood planning efforts. And so then when we have initiatives like this and we go out and talk about it, it feels really radical because there wasn't that conversation and that groundwork to talk about, like, I think the terms are great, but we should also talk about like, what are those income ranges, right, for affordable housing? Like if you make $78,000 a year in Denver, you qualify for an affordable housing unit at 80% AMI. I think that shocks a lot of people. You know, like so I think we just need to take more time to kind of talk about all those things through the steps so that we're bringing everyone with us. Because I think that alone, this idea of like single unit, well, if I'm in a single, you know, family neighborhood, there's no growth. That's just not true.
Great comment. So I think we are getting deep. I love this conversation. We're getting kind of into the discussion portion. If we can get through this, then we have another place to, along with the discussion, we want to have an opportunity for people who maybe aren't as willing to step up and talk and say their piece, that we'll be able to get their comments out and heard and discussed in multiple ways, just a little bit more engaging. So if there's no more really clarification type questions, then I will pass it off to Andrew to take over our next session, and we're just going to talk about the advisory committee role and kind of a little bit more about the process.
Great, thanks, Rob. Appreciate all that background information. I recognize a lot of you as veterans of previous advisory committees for NVI plans, neighborhood planning initiative plans, or zoning code text amendments, but I also know that a few of you, this may be the first time you've served on one of these committees. So I wanted to share a little bit about how we put these committees together and the kind of work that we'll be doing together and our expectations of a volunteer committee like this. We frequently assemble, and not just CPD, other city agencies as well, frequently assemble these sort of ad hoc committees to focus on a specific topic that will impact the larger public. And the goal of these committees is to have a real cross-section of experiences and expertise that are relevant to the project, but that also represent Denver's varied neighborhoods and geography and demographics and lived experiences. So as is typically the case, we start with a web-based interest form that we send out to community organizations. Those include nonprofits and registered neighborhood organizations and city council members and other community leaders. We reach out directly to people that we know may be interested, and we also reach out to those community leaders to ask them if they can make referrals to us about people who might be interested. This map actually shows one of the ways that we kind of do these, evaluate the members of a committee to ensure that, in this case, that we have, a fairly even geographic representation around the city. And that's one of kind of many analyses that we do when we put these together. This project had a lot of interest. We had more than 150 people apply to serve on this committee, which was wonderful. After closing our interest form in May, we narrowed that down to about 40 people that we interviewed, and then further narrowed that down to the manageably sized group that you all see here today. I want to highlight that again, really appreciated the incredible amount of interest in this project, and the people who were not chosen for the committee, we've actually already identified for their specific interest areas for focus groups that we'll hold later in the fall, and that you'll see on the project schedule that Rob will show here in a couple slides, in a few more slides, where we'll really zero in on some key topics that they were interested in discussing. So next slide, please. We hope this committee will help us with several elements of the project. That includes bringing a wide variety of lived experience, expertise, and perspectives to a challenging discussion around housing. In our experience, committee members and the work that they do helps us kind of bridge the gap between government and the communities that we live in and work for. And we hope, and I think it's already happened a few times today, the committee members will help us identify the blind spots that they're aware of that we may not be aware of, and help share some of the ideas that are emerging in these conversations, and bring back feedback from the groups that they're with which they're affiliated and their extended networks and communities. Next slide, please. Just to talk a little bit about the process, as this project unfolds over the next few months, we'll be bringing specific ideas and concepts to the committee for feedback. We'll typically bring those in the form of a slide deck that we'll share with the committee in advance. We'll take that committee feedback in these meetings and iterate those ideas based on that feedback, and then bring them back for more discussion. We'll also frequently look to the committee and individual members for their own ideas and suggestions. In later stages of the project, as we're starting to kind of draft and propose zoning code amendments to the ultimate decision makers like planning board and city council, we'll share the perspectives of the committee as part of the written narrative that accompanies any text amendment as it goes through the adoption process. And committee members will also be encouraged to attend and share their experiences and thoughts during the public meetings, as well as during the hearings that we would expect to take place for this in 2026. Committee meetings will generally be held on a monthly basis with some breaks in between. And again, we'll show kind of an anticipated schedule, sort of draft schedule of what we expect that to look like into the spring or the middle of next year. And we do hope that you'll try to attend to the best of your ability, whether in person or whether the virtual option that we'll always offer for these. We'll try to schedule the meetings as far in advance as possible so you can make sure that they're on your calendars. And we ask that you let us know how we can support your participation. If there's something else we can be doing to make sure that you're able to attend and participate meaningfully, please let us know, and we're happy to try to figure that out. Next slide. So finally here, I'm going to share a few expectations of our volunteer advisory committee. First, the members of this advisory committee were selected for their backgrounds and experience, and that comes often from the organizations that you all participate in or volunteer for. But committee members are not expected, and nor should they be assumed to be representing the views of the organizations that they're affiliated with. We hope members, and we encourage members to explore the pros and cons of these proposals without their input being considered as an official position provided on behalf of an RNO or an organization that they're affiliated with. So put simply, this is a safe place, a safe space for frank discussion, and we hope you'll respect that. So second, housing and neighborhoods are always very emotional topics to talk about, and we expect there'll be strong and often opposing opinions in this group. We'll do our best to ensure that all the committee voices are heard, and we'll ask members to respect differences in opinion, as well as their fellow committee members and city staff through this process. Finally, a word about kind of taking the temperature of the room. So occasionally We will try to gauge the opinions of the committee on a particular topic. Those will be informal polls, like maybe we may use Mentimeter. We may use something as simple as just a raise of hands. In a committee this diverse on topics like this, a formal consensus may not be possible. But our goal is to develop proposals for zoning code changes that committee members can live with. We do want to acknowledge that members of the public are welcome and encouraged to attend and watch these meetings. We will ask them to refrain from participation in any of that informal straw polling or voting. We will also, as Rob will explain in more detail, hold actual public meetings to really seek that broader input. And we'll use other polling tools as well, such as online surveys, to seek a broader community input. Similarly, council members who serve on the committee may send aides in their absence, and committee members who are part of some organization may occasionally ask a colleague or someone else on the organization to attend if they're not able to. We just want to note that we reserve the right in that if we are taking, trying to do an informal poll, we may ask people who are not officially members of the community to not, or of the committee, to not participate in that polling. So I'll stop there, ask if anybody has questions about any of the information I just shared.
I just want to note that my aides would kill me if I asked them to come here in my place. Dana, right?
I think Dana should be here.
I'm sure it's good time, so they might enjoy it. Yes, I'll have it.
Will we be hearing from the focus groups, like the results or anything while we're doing all these?
Absolutely. We'll definitely endeavor to share back both the broader public opinion that we hear back to this group, as well as any of the targeted focus group information that we have. We'll also, make those meeting times and places known so that if you'd like to attend, you can be able to.
Yes, that's one.
Just want to thank you all for the landing page. So I'll plan to share this website out because it's got some peer review or peer CD report and kind of the background of the committee. And I imagine that's where you're going to be posting all of the meeting notes and videos and stuff.
Yes, yeah. We'll post the recordings and the notes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, Todd.
Who'll be conducting those focus groups?
I believe it will probably be our consultants. Individuals share a little bit differently when city officials are not in the room.
The only thing, I'm not sure I agree with you, especially from my community. I can tell you they won't trust a person that is not from the community leading. And if you want help to get people there, I suggest you work with us who are close to our community.
Yeah, that would be great. And that's a great comment. So.
Happy to get people out there.
Any other questions about the advisory committee? Gosha.
Yeah, kind of a process question or maybe suggestion. I'm assuming that you're gonna do kind of a policy background overview of how this project is grounded in our adopted plans. I'm hoping that you're planning kind of a training or maybe overview of equity, how we are to apply equity concepts to this project. Yeah, given the legacy of zoning as element of segregation, I think it'd be great to kind of level set and have that conversation.
Yes, we are definitely planning on doing that. The last project that kind of was a longer text amendment similar to this one, the advancing equity and rezoning, that was a little bit more straightforward. But yeah, in the first couple meetings, we typically have that, and it might be kind of equity, someone from the CPD team, or it might be someone from the office of the OSEI office in the city. So
thank you.
Any other questions about the advisory committee role? Great. Okay, so we're going to get to the comments and questions in just a second, but I feel like this might address some of the questions that come up. And this is the schedule moving forward that really focuses on the kind of core period of engagement in this project. As you can see, it cuts off in April, and the project will kind of be still moving along at that point. However, this is when our core kind of development of the strategy and core engagement will occur. So along the bottom, you can see the kind of general cadence of the advisory committee meetings, starting with this one. We've left these very broad because depending on how a conversation goes and what concerns are that come up, we're leaving this somewhat flexible. So this is somewhat subject to change. However, in addition to the advisory committee meetings along the bottom, you can also see when we plan on having those focus groups, and then the rounds of community meetings sometime later this fall, and then next year in the spring, probably September and March. And these say community meetings round one because we would like to have kind of geographically separated meetings, and there'll be a couple community meetings at each of these time periods when we go out. That way it's easier for folks to come find us. So, but yes, in April or so is when we expect to then take what we've developed in this team, which is kind of like that written or that strategy that says we're going to make these changes and do this, and we're going to make that like into the actual redlined code document, and then bring that forward through the adoption process, which is that very where we'll have the public hearings with the planning board and city council before adoption. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second, and I'm going to pull up a Mentimeter. Has anyone used Mentimeter before? So what you can do, and I'll share my screen in a second, you can see this. Let's see. And use this code. So if you go to menti.com, you can do this on your phone. It's just as easy. And go and it's blocked. I can't see that. There we go. All right. So if you go to menti.com, the only thing that'll be on that page is a little prompt where you can enter that code, which is 8407.
Read that number again.
Sure. Okay. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
Hold on, wait a minute, wait.
Okay.
Menti.com?
Yes.
M-E-N-T-I. M-E-N-T.
Minty like minty fresh.
That's what I had.
Why? With an I.
Hold again. M-E-N-T-I.
M-E-N-T-I.
All right, I'm gonna read it out, but I'll read it out again, so don't worry. The code is 8407-4541. And through that, it should just bring you to an open box where you can put in a question or comment. However, because we only have about a half hour left in the meeting, and we have a lot of people, this is a way that we can really hear from everybody. And also, if folks don't like to speak so much, they can still get their input to us, and we can also uplift things if we see something repeated. So, does anyone need the code again? Okay, so with that, I think we'd like to open up for kind of general comments. Are there, I think a general prompt might be, what are some things that when we talk about this project that you might be concerned about us missing, or that you would really want us to make sure that we are exploring, whether that's information or a concern within your community, or any number of things. And also at this point too, this is where you all are the committee. So you can respond to one, raise your hand, of course, and follow the rules of etiquette that we kind of outlined. But, everything doesn't have to be directed at us. You can all have a conversation with each other as well. So with that, Rod, I saw your hand up first.
Yeah, so on the overall scope, whenever I start a design project, we always have like the goals in mind that are defined, and you check back in with them periodically. And as I'm thinking about the number of units we're talking about creating here, the massing, the forms, the spaces we're creating, and what does that do to our neighborhoods and the look and feel, I started going back into some of the numbers you sent out in that packet that you reiterated today, a few of those numbers. There was some numbers in there about the number of units we're talking about creating is 216,000 units for this missing middle between now and 2032, I believe it said in one of the packets. And I started running the math
backwards to the number of lots that we're talking about using when, I think that 10% of those single family lots is just over 23,000 lots we're talking about doing this to. But it did say that 26,000 units we need to create was the Denver region, which I'm assuming is some of the surrounding municipalities as well. Is there a number that Denver is looking to out of that 216,000? Because when I ran the numbers, if it was all 216,000, that's like 9 units per lot for those 10% of those lots. And I was like, that's pretty dense infill we're talking about building. And it's a big difference if Denver's only taking 50% of that type of number of units just to meet our goals. Like what are, we're not going to meet our goal or there's no way to do it. I think that's a thing we should look at and discuss as we go through this process.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll clarify that I don't think through this project that we are going to provide all of that gap between that's the current supply and current and future need. And you're right, that number is kind of like the sub area from the Denver Regional Council of Governments housing needs assessment that they had done. So I don't think that we can have at this point tied the number of units to be created to any specific number. That is more just a demonstration of the need, and it's kind of how sure we are. I would not be surprised, and it was most likely that the largest number of new units being created will still be in areas that are not affected by this project. The mixed use areas along corridors in our kind of more dense areas. Those areas will probably still continue to provide the lion's share of new housing. But by unlocking these areas to additional units, we do kind of help relieve that so that it's a little just provides more options.
And I just had like one other, this is more of a clarity question. It did say that started in 2023 to 2032. Is there any, how much have we created in the last 2 years or so? Is there any data out there on like, what does the last 2 years look like? Because I know there's been a lot of push to increase density.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. Well, in next month's presentation, when we have our kind of one of the things we'll be looking at is the issue identification, where we kind of look more closely at that data. And that's something I can make sure that we do have.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I think we do actually have more Denver specific numbers presented today. We looked at the 143,000 people by 2050.
Yeah.
So that was more the city of Denver.
Right.
Numbers, I believe, to adjust your math if you want to.
Yeah, I like math. It helps.
So yeah, 143,000 compared to that 216 you were.
Yeah. Because that was significantly less than the 216.
Yes.
And that was number of individuals, it sounded like, not households. So that, I don't know what the math fleshes out there.
Yeah, we shifted in this and got more specific data, even though the data isn't, as recent as that, or anyway, but yes.
Well, those are more realistic, when you're talking about 70,000 units versus 216 or whatever that flushes out with 143.
Yeah.
It's a big difference between like duplexes and fourplexes solving the problem we're talking about solving than 8plexes and 9plexes.
Yes, this project will not solve completely the housing need, right? This is just kind of like, that's part of what this will help relieve some of that pressure on the neighborhoods that are seeing more of that rapid development to take that pressure off of them. But the majority of the new units being created, as far as by the unit count, will probably still be within the areas along corridors and mixed use areas with big buildings. Yes, go ahead, Lucia.
A couple things.
Lucia.
Yeah, you just said that what we're doing here isn't gonna solve it. What are we doing? We should be solving it here and now. What we're doing here should be able to build 143,000 units by 2050. If we're not, what are we doing? We're gonna have to come back again and do it again. And that gets to where I was wanting to go on this. So 25 years ago, I worked on the Baker area plan, and I also worked to help get historic designation for the Baker neighborhood. And we were very excited about it back then. But when I was doing that, I had no idea we were heading for the housing crisis that we have now. So you know, I wear this locket that has my son's pictures in it because I'm doing this for them, because they cannot afford to live in this city. And if I had known 25 years ago that my actions would have led to the crisis that we're in now, I would not have done it. So I'm worried about what we're doing here is not, if it's not going to solve the problem, what are we doing?
I like it, yeah.
When we have more commenters, I think we'll set up some system to get people in queue to speak. That might be the more orderly way to do it.
Can I just say that 9 units and lower is not gonna solve the problem, and that's the only thing we're talking about in here. Larger multi-unit properties are still being built, can still be built, play a huge role in getting to that 143,000. We have to look at, I think, sizable chunks of policy, and this is one of those. I don't expect my district's single unit zoning to fully meet the need of 143,000 residences. And I don't expect that of the yellow zoned area of the city, right? Everything in the city is contributing to that. We're trying to solve one of the pieces, is what I would say.
How many units are there? Do we have that number? How many single units are there, not including ADUs?
Citywide.
Yes.
We do have it. I mean, we'd have to pull it exactly, but I recall somewhere around,
Let's get the data.
yeah, 30 to 40,000 based on like DE projects.
So if we took 30, 40,000 units and multiplied that by 4, done. I know that's a very simplified thing, but I'm saying it can be done if we do it everywhere and not just putting it in the inverted L.
So again, before we get in comments, because I think this is gonna take off, and I'd like to set something up for you to be okay to track. So raise your hand and make eye contact with Andrew. When you get a head nod, just kind of know that you're in queue, and we'll keep track that way. So go. Maybe I'll start with Donna, since I saw you while you're getting hands.
Well, just following on, yes, we don't want to build just in the inverted L. There's one star in all of my far northeast community, and are you far northeast?
I am still far northeast.
Okay, so
Yes, I
there are
am.
2 of us here, and we're probably the only part of Denver that has land that can still be built. And yet right now we are inundated with so many multiple housing and developers who are exercising by right and not paying attention to the rest of the infrastructure and Pena Boulevard. Oh my God, you know, let's don't even go there. I can't even get to work in the morning on time. So I'm very concerned about 140,000 units, but I don't want them all in far northeast, please.
That is people, not units, to clarify.
People.
Councilman Flynn is next.
Thank you. Somebody said something earlier on in the meeting about number of bedrooms per unit. Councilwoman Torres probably appreciates this as much as I do. On council, we approve so many loans for projects that are studio and 1 bedroom. And what does that do for families? My district is family oriented, so is District 3. I was so happy when Loretto, when the first project, Pancratia Hall, opened up with a majority of multi-bedroom units. And I encouraged hosts at the time to consider the loan amount based on bedroom count as much as on unit count, because they could maximize unit count with a 1-bedroom project. But if they counted bedrooms, that might be a little more effective in housing families. So I hope that that's within our scope also.
Lupe, I believe you're next.
So it's along those lines, I was hoping to understand with the metrics that we're using as it relates to individuals versus successful units and how those would be split up, whether it's a matrix of, 70% 1 bedrooms and so on. How would we feel it will be a successful metric of trying to at least engage how many individuals per household, that would then kind of work into how many units we provide. This is the added benefit of, looking out for families who are more need these days of needing that 2-bedroom plus kind of ratio.
Something to track.
Are we going to look at the peer cities next month, y'all?
Yes.
Okay, so that's fine. Because I had just a couple of, I don't know if we can find all this data because some cities have upzoned recently. So we're looking at like 2 years ago, 4 years ago. So this might be a tough gig. But if we could look at this data, it would be really helpful. One is just related to the uptake. Okay, so once a city has upzoned, what do we actually see about the uptake within a city for duplexes, triplexes, additional housing? Is there anything that we can say about that with the peer cities or other cities that have done this? Because other cities have done it too, right? Then the other question that I have is just thinking about, we've talked about neighborhoods that have naturally occurring affordable housing. There are communities in Denver that have that. I'm curious about whether we can disaggregate any kind of data related to when an upzoning has happened, what happens to changes in affordability and changes in diversity among communities that I don't know how we would define the NOAA part. It could be like below the median, below the existing median income, the existing median house price for the city or something like that. But what can we learn? What can we learn? Because I hear a lot of conversations already coming out about different neighborhoods, how this is going to affect different neighborhoods differently. So I'm just curious if there's anything that we can say that we could learn from other cities there.
Yes, fortunately, there are some cities like Portland, and I would say take a look at the website in our peer city research, and there are links to those documents that kind of have a lot of their are the best documented city. And then also, we are definitely mining into that data right now, so we hope in the next couple months in one of our meetings to come back.
Can I just piggyback on that just really quickly? Can we look at international models? Like, I know we're not Japan or Switzerland, but there might be something to be gleaned from other parts of the world, because I think we're kind of almost too late to do it, like we're catching up.
Can we have blocks like in Barcelona?
Good luck. Yield that.
Have Lucas next and then Joel.
Thanks. Yeah. So one of the reasons NDC was really interested in this project is for a number of reasons. For one, our members brought forth interest in doing something like this, so we're really excited that the city took it on. But that also gave us the opportunity to start doing a little bit of digging on the front end. And so we've done a bit of research into both the economic theory and then also the academic research on this. And what draws us to this is the opportunity to divert demand from higher income demographics from lower income neighborhoods if this is applied to single unit zone districts across the city. Because at the moment, if you're, making near or slightly above the median income in Denver, the only place you can afford a house is in the inverted L, and avoid. And if you're looking to avoid horrendous HOA fees. So this can provide the opportunity to alleviate gentrification pressure in those areas and displacement pressure by allowing people the opportunity to purchase in what are now single unit zone districts that are currently very expensive. But if they were to allow, say, 900 square foot quads, then those would be significantly below what's currently on offer there. The other thing to your question about Portland and some data, they've done a study on the effectiveness of their program. They found the most popular home that this reform yielded was a 2-bedroom home. So this would be great for a family starting out, an entry-level home, starter home, if you will. While their demolitions have stayed flat, the number of homes they've seen per demolition, new homes, has gone from 1.4 to 3 point some. So this has not increased the number of homes that have been torn down in the city, but it's allowed the city to absorb more population without necessarily churning over the existing housing stock. And so if neighborhood character to you means like physical characteristics, this has helped preserve some of them. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, just maybe Lucas and I are saying the same thing in a different way, but I raised my hand after Mary Kate spoke because one way I think we should look at affordability here, and not necessarily income restricted affordability, but practical kind of affordability, is hyper local. The house at the end of my block that's subdivided into 4 units, each of those units is a lot less expensive for somebody to live in than a full house. But my house is much less expensive than a house in a very wealthy part of the city. And a house in that very wealthy part of the city that was divided into 4 units, those 4 units might be more expensive than the 4 units at the end of my block, but a lot cheaper, a lot more attainable than the other units in that wealthy area. So this is what I mean by this hyper local. Every time we're making it possible to have missing middle in a neighborhood, it's adding affordability to that neighborhood relative to wherever that neighborhood was. And I think that's a great virtue we should find a way to talk about in a less wordy way than I just did. Because I think it's important, and it gets lost when we start talking about AMI levels, because those are kind of like citywide.
Yeah, point of clarification on the housing units. We have approximately 40,000 single units per context. So that'd be like urban edge. So approximately 120,000 single unit dwellings citywide. Where we're at, or we were back then.
Gosh, say that number again.
120,000 approximately. Single unit dwellings citywide. This is data from 3 years ago.
Okay. And do we know how they're
Growing every day.
distributed in like districts perhaps?
Roughly in thirds. We can pull those exact numbers for you. We can run it again for our next meeting to get more specific, but ballpark figures.
Josh, could we get how many housing units are in the city in total? Because that seemed kind of low.
We'd have to run those numbers for apartments, condos, etc.
We'll have all this like more detailed data. I think this is something that you guys want to see and something that we're working on getting. There's like a lot of cleanup that goes into getting all this information. So, but yeah, we would love to look at the data with you guys. So we'll pull that up.
We have Alejandra, Angela, and then I believe Carson. Do I have that right?
I was wondering, I guess I was confused whether we're not discussing what we're posting on Menti.
We can. This was just another opportunity for kind of people to be heard by us and seen by other
Okay,
members.
got it. I thought that you were gonna be looking at that.
Okay, yes. If conversation slows down, I definitely will.
Well, I want to bring up the one that I put here because something that I talk to a lot of people about is people who work in the city of Denver, city and county of Denver, but cannot afford to live here. And they are often excluded from these conversations because they're not, constituents of any of the council members, but they are providing an essential service to many of us, like, firefighters, teachers, the person who cuts my hair at the coffee shop, whatever. So is there a way to include their voices into this conversation? Is that something that's working on, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is something that we're going to try to do with like really targeted and kind of engagement. A lot of times that is trickier, right? Because those are the people who might not have time to be engaged, but it's a lot about like meeting people where they are and things like that. So,
or like the kids, like for example, next door, is a 3-generation family who was for a while. Now the kids have moved out because they cannot afford to live. So the older daughter lives down in the basement with the husband, and then the mother, Tina, is 93. She lives on top. And so the 3 grandchildren who are now in their 20s, they're, living outside of Denver. And so that also, connects with, transportation and car and driving and all of that, which has so much to do with the land use. So are we engaging with those types of people in a way that, does that matter? I wonder to the city council members present here, do those voices matter to you? Like people who have, like, how do you think about people like that in your decision making?
I guess I think of them as interested parties. And if they're working in Denver, maybe they've previously lived in Denver. We have policies that still speak to people who have been pushed out. Preference policies speak to some of that population. I think a lot of the time that even when we've been recruiting for different opportunities, we talk about live and or work in Denver, so that there is a stake or opinion in what that influence has meant. So when we do surveys, I think that might be relevant. I'm reluctant, I think, to overemphasize people who don't live in Denver anymore. I think it's really important to know some of the distinction there, because I think a lot of people will have opinions who are not dealing with a housing question or issue right now that they want to talk about. We've got 715,000 residents who we know we still need to hear from on this. And so it's tough to open it up to the metro region, I guess. So if there are, I think some distinct, very interested people, I'm sure, can make their way in an opportunity somehow, or connect with somebody on council or CPD directly. I'm not sure exactly how to address that. I just feel really strongly that those who live in my district, like, I want to make sure those voices I'm tapping into, as opposed to going straight to people who don't.
I also have, the other side of that coin is I've met a lot of folks, not necessarily working for the city, but in the city, who by choice live outside Denver. They've chosen to live in, good Lord, Elbert County, places like that. Bailey. I've known some people who commute from Bailey. I worked with a woman at the Rocky Mountain News who commuted from mountains out near Conifer every day.
Yeah, I wasn't referring to those people. I was referring mostly to people who want to live here or lived here but were pushed out. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's two different sides of the coin. And I don't know how to reach one or the other exclusively. I think you have a very good point. I would like to hear from them.
Thank you.
We're gonna try, so we have just a couple minutes left, so who we have on the list here, if you can make it super quick, we can try to get through these people, and in like 2 minutes, I'm gonna cut it off, because we've gotta talk about when the next meeting is, and then get everyone out the door on time, so.
So next up, I have Angela, Carson, and then Nola.
Oh, mine is just a really quick comment and a follow-up to your comment about our committee assignment and how it will be implemented and will we see the results of what we're doing. I'm speaking from experience and knowing that when I've served on committees within the city and the state, and as personnel change through attrition or through just leaving, whatever, then things get to fall off. So I'm concerned about that too. How is what we're doing going to be effective for our future generations? And when we see that, as a result of what we're doing in this committee, because I worked on the affordable housing procedures and policies with HOST before the HOST became HOST. It used to be another name. Then there were all these changes within the city, and it took us way longer to get those changes implemented than we had anticipated at the beginning of our committee assignment. So that's just a comment that I wanted to make so that we are focused on, hey, we're just not here meeting. We do want to be effective. We do want to make a dent. We want to make a change into what our goals for this project will be.
Thank you.
Carson.
Yeah, so, well, we're primarily focused on zoning here, right? Just like, I think it's important for us to understand how zoning changes interact with like the larger policy landscape, right? And how there will be different outcomes depending on other policy interventions that happen, right? So, it's going to be different depending on like, what if there were stronger for-cause eviction protections, right? What if the state was to repeal the ban on rent control and we were to have rent control here in Denver, right? How would that affect the effects of land use changes like this, or like, money for rehabbing old properties or community ownership of missing middle housing. And so understanding how all those pieces fit together
when we talk about like the potential consequences of these changes, right? And how state action or city action could affect those down the line. Because, you know, we're not operating in a vacuum here. Those are other pieces of the puzzle that are super important to consider. And like while supply is like a really important factor, right? There are a lot of other aspects of like housing stability that aren't as directly affected by pure supply considerations. And so really having a holistic view of the policy landscape when we're talking here.
Thank you. And we have Nola, we have one other person who's requested to get in queue as well. If we have,
maybe have time for Nola, and then we'll cut it off.
okay.
Nola, go ahead.
Yeah, I think my comment really builds on what Carson's saying. I think we just have to be explicit about another part of the problem that we're addressing is the need for deed-restricted affordable housing. And we need to be able to have advantages for affordable housers, especially if we're not able to, we have budget limitations, we're not able to just keep adding to subsidies. We have to have other types of strategies, and affordable housers in particular need to have those strategies. So we can get into the details as we go forward, but I just want to make sure that's part of our conversations.
Awesome, thank you, Nola, and it certainly will be. So with that, I think, you know, I really appreciate you guys all being here again. Next meeting scheduled for August 26th, and we are going to get deeper into these three topics here. Issue identification, so that's a lot of the data on what's kind of leading to us kind of undertaking a project, looking at a lot of the peer cities and kind of doing a deeper evaluation of our plan guidance. There'll probably be some more structured discussion too, so we can kind of focus the conversation. But if you have any other things in the meantime that come up after this meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the other team members.
Meeting here
We'll-
again?
We'll meet here again, yes.
I think another like list of everybody on.
Can you send calendar invites for the whole series so we can call the time?
As soon as we get them scheduled, we will, yes. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, real quick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
When they were like.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
At all?
We can hear you. They can hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, also.
Interesting, yeah.
No, towards $5 million.
Anna sent me a message.
Andrew and I just. So I know Robert's not happy.
Some of the CIP events.
There's more of the ball.
And there was that from the. So I think it was something around. It's been interesting.
This looks like.